Good morning. I thought I would come out here and enjoy my morning cup of coffee with you guys and just kind of share some of the thoughts that I've been having after being at the Quillisascut Farm. The next few weeks, I will be sharing this as well. So this is the day one kind of experience. And if you've been following along on Instagram, you'll know that today's kind of focus is respect. And that was the topic of discussion for the first day that we were on the farm. And so I wanted to share some of those thoughts with you. And one of the things that I shared that was probably the most impactful experience was the animal butchery on this day. And that included a lamb. So I saw the lamb basically go from what we would associate with being an animal and then be converted into what arrives at your butcher and what looks like meat, what would be wrapped in plastic or paper and handed to you. And so it was really interesting to not only see the reverence that was taken with the animal's body and the respect for the life that was given for the food that was going to be prepared, but also for the connection to our food. It really made me start to evaluate how disconnected we are from our food. Even people who eat primarily plant-based, like we might be getting carrots or cauliflower from farms that are thousands of miles away, hundreds of miles away. I've been recently looking up when I purchase food now, where the farms are that I'm buying these things from. And it really isn't local. It might say local, but that might mean within my own state. In California here, we have a very large state. So some of the local foods are 13 hours away. That probably wouldn't be considered local on the East Coast to buy something from Florida and buy it in Pennsylvania and call that local. So, it's really been impacting me how far away we are from the food that we're consuming and how that could be impacting us as humans, as we go about our lives and our health. And so, one of these things that really hit me was that I am a 31-year-old woman. And for the most part, this is probably one of my first major experiences with death. I have seen animals pass away, been around that, but it really hasn't been so impactful. And the animals that were passing away before were pets and things like that weren't going to be consumed or a human life. I have dealt with a lot of death in my occupation, and I think that has cultivated a different perspective on death for me. But at the same time, we as a society often are very disconnected from what I feel I experienced on the farm as kind of like real life. I mean, I don't want to necessarily call that real life, but it is a fact of life that life and death happens on a regular basis. And when we're consuming things, whether that be a plant or an animal that is very far away from its place of origin or where it was grown, we're disconnected from the life that was given for that food to make it to us. And, it really kind of came through in some of the discussions we had where there was a reading, which I can't quite find at the moment, but it kind of talked about how when we aren't connected with the person who grew the food, whether that be us, a farmer, or someone that we know, that we don't always have the same reverence for that food that was produced. And so, the reading had talked about if you had tended that lamb and prepared that meat from start to finish, you had taken care of the life of that animal or plant, and you had grown it up to the point where you were going to then use it for your own food, how much better care would you take of that item? Would you leave that rack of lamb on the burner a little too long so that it got singed, or would you carefully mind it? Would you pay mindful attention and intention when you're cooking that item so that you made sure that you prepared the best, that you made sure that it was not ruined, that it was treated as a precious item? And so I think that we really have lost some of that appreciation in how we currently develop food. And I know that is in part because of necessity. And what really struck me was that there were kind of some jokes on the farm about like, almond milk not being real milk, and anything that's not from an animal, is it really milk? And so, you know, one of those things, as being someone who probably has kept the almond milk and macadamia milk businesses going over the last 10 years, those things kind of struck me, where I started to understand that macadamia nuts are primarily grown in Australia. That is being shipped all the way across an ocean in order to be made into a milk. Most of the process of that is going to create a significant amount of waste, or it's hopefully going to be used for another product, but we don't know. If we have that disconnection, we don't know what's going to be used. And then it's going to be put into a container, creating more waste and being brought to me. And so, you know, is that respectful of the trees that are producing that? Is it respectful of me and the genes that I was born into, that have genes that came from a very different part of the world, from Ireland, from the Middle East, from England, and things like that? Like, I don't have the genes from Australia that would have grown to be well nourished from a macadamia nut. And probably the same for almonds. Almonds are a stone fruit family, so maybe that would be a little different, but you know, it really has taught me a lot of lessons about intentional living, intentional eating, and it was really strange how mindfulness was an integrated part of the farm. You didn't have to consider meditating, because there were acts that caused a state of meditation. And so how that being built into that real life experience really is something that we lack in our current daily lifestyle. So I kind of wanted to leave you guys with a few thoughts. And so I'm looking at my notes here, but I wanted to invite you guys to consider how you want to reconnect with your food. How are there ways that you could either reconnect with a food item, have more respect for that food item, and or maybe grow something yourself? That is really empowering when we can bring something to our own table. And in this reading that I was talking about, there was a word that was used that I'll probably discuss a little bit more in future posts, but it was the word terroir. And it looks like terror, but it really means of the earth. And it's usually used for something like wine. And so in my posts this week on Instagram, I had talked about how we can infuse different herbs and things into foods, like creams or salts or oils and vinegars, and that takes the flavors of the land and puts it into our food. And so one of the things that I really appreciated was that everything that we were eating on the farm really tasted and brought to life the flavors that were present while you walked around the farm. There were the herbs growing around, so you would smell them. You would see the honeybees going to the flowers of some of the herbs that had bolted. And so that gives a really different perspective. Are you eating things that reflect the area that you live in? And the area that you live in, what are those flavors? What is the terroir of your region? And I hope I'm saying that right. It's a French word, so I think I am, but you never know. And so one of the other things that I wanted to leave you with is not just how do you want to reconnect with your food or connect deeper with your food, but was also to consider what can intention do to help support our bodies and our health if we use that for preparing our meals. So I know over the last year, sometimes I have just thrown together meals, and it's been really just whatever we have in the house, because I'm going through medical school and that is an intense time, and sometimes that's what it takes. But how would I have maybe had a less stressed time if I had taken a few minutes to intentionally sit down and eat and focus on the food that I'm eating rather than trying to scarf it while I pay attention to a lecture? And so some of those things I'll probably talk about in the future, but how does that impact our health when we don't intentionally eat, when we're eating in a rush, and when we're eating foods that we have no idea where they came from? So I hope this was helpful for you and some food for thought, and I hope you'll follow along for the rest of the videos. Until next time, be well.